Thank you. It's great to be back. It is true that many of the people in this room for 4 years failed to cover the fact that Joe Biden was mentally incompetent and was not running the country. It is also true that many people in this room who have used this talking point that Elon is not elected fail to understand how government works. So I'm glad for the opportunity for a brief civics lesson. A president is elected by the whole American people. He's the only official in the entire government that is elected by the entire nation, right? Judges are appointed, members of Congress are elected at the district or state level. Just one man. And the Constitution, Article 2, has a clause known as the vesting clause, and it says the executive power shall be vested in a president, singular. The whole will of democracy is imbued into the elected president. That president then appoints staff to then impose that democratic will onto the government. The threat to democracy, indeed the existential threat to democracy, is the unelected bureaucracy of lifetime tenured civil servants who believe they answer to no one, who believe they can do whatever they want without consequence, who believe they can set their own agenda no matter what Americans vote for. So Americans vote for radical FBI reform, and FBI agents say they don't want to change. Or Americans vote for radical reform on our energy policies, but EPA bureaucrats say they don't want to change. Or Americans vote to end DEI, racist DEI policies, and lawyers at the Department of Justice say they don't want to change. What President Trump is doing is he is removing federal bureaucrats who are defying democracy by failing to implement his lawful orders, which are the will of the whole American people. And I want to just thank you all for joining today our 1-month celebration of the most historic opening to a presidency in American history. No president comes close to what Donald Trump has achieved over just the last 30 days. He has packed 8 years of transformative action, restoring this nation, restoring our laws, restoring fairness, restoring economic opportunity, restoring national security in just 1 month. No one in this country has ever seen anything like it. And when you look at the consequentiality and the significance and the transformative nature of the actions he's taking, it truly defies description. For example, in just one area, this nation has been plagued and crippled by illegal discrimination, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. It's strangled our economy. It has undermined public safety. It has made every aspect of life more difficult, more painful, and less safe. He has ended all DEI across the federal government. He has terminated all federal workers involved in promulgating these unlawful policies. He has ended diversity, equity, and inclusion in all federal contracting. He has restored merit as the cornerstone of all federal policy, restored the full, fair, impartial enforcement of our federal civil rights laws for the first time in generations. And he has cracked down on individuals across this government and nonprofits who have engaged in illegal racial discrimination against the American people. This includes making clear to every educational institution in this country that ending diversity, equity, and inclusion, ending unlawful race discrimination is a precondition of receiving federal funds. He has also saved women's sports by ending the participation of men in women's sports. He has ended radical gender ideology across the entire federal government, and he's pressured the private sector to also end and combat radical gender ideology. He's reestablished the scientific and biological truth that there are only 2 sexes in this country, male and female, that those are biologically based determinations. They are not based and can never be based on gender identity. That includes rooting out of the Department of Defense all DEI policies, all critical race theory, all gender madness, and once again having a military that is focused solely and exclusively on readiness, preparedness, and lethality. As I'm sure Kevin will talk about more, of course, he has undertaken a historic cost-cutting effort across the federal government, launching the first ever Department of Government Efficiency, uncovering corruption on a scale that we never thought imaginable, terminating every single federal worker that we have found to be engaged in the corruption and theft and the waste of taxpayer dollars, and already saving $50 billion in a single year, which over a 10-year period would be $500 billion. Just think about how vast and enormous that sum is. Of course, as you all know, He has renamed the Gulf of Mexico to its correct and proper name, the Gulf of America. He has renamed Mount Denali into Mount McKinley, part of a historic effort to restore patriotism and national pride all across this land. He has ended the weaponization of the federal government, restored the Department of Justice to its true mission of combating threats to this nation and keeping the American people safe. He has ended all federal censorship of free speech. This has been one of the greatest crises that has plagued this nation. Years and years and years of the federal government violating the First Amendment to take away Americans' right of free speech. President Trump has ended that, and he has demanded that all federal workers, all law enforcement, cease any effort to intimidate the rights of Americans or to police their speech. He has also restored the death penalty at the Department of Justice, including for illegal aliens who commit murder, including for those who murder cops, and including for all of those who threaten Americans with heinous acts of violence. The death penalty is back. Law and order is back. The streets are being made safe once again. On the public health front, he has launched the nation's first ever commission, the MAHA Commission, Make America Healthy Again, following the historic confirmation of RFK Jr., to finally uncover the true root causes of the public health crisis in this country, the childhood disease epidemic in this country, the spiraling rates of pediatric cancer, and devastating childhood sickness. He has finally created a situation where the federal health agencies in this country will be focused on preventing disease, on keeping children from getting sick in the first place, not sending them to a lifetime in and out of hospitals, suffering needlessly, when we can find ways to prevent this epidemic of illness. Then, of course, on Homeland Security. Today, it is officially the law of the land, at the conclusion of the congressional notification process, that 6 Mexican cartels and 2 transnational gangs, Tren de Aragua, or TDA, and MS-13, so 8 organizations in total, are now formally designated as foreign terrorist organizations, which means that every single member of those organizations who operates on U.S. soil is now, as a legal matter, a terrorist, and they will be treated as terrorists. This is a sea change in U.S. policy, and this means the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security, along with the rest of U.S. law enforcement and the Department of Defense, are now operating in a legal reality where these cartels are recognized as terrorists. And there will be a whole of government effort to remove these terrorists from our soil and to degrade their ability to threaten or undermine any American security or sovereignty interests. Border crossings, since the day he took office, are down 95%. I think it's almost impossible to even describe the scale and scope of that achievement. President Trump, within days of taking office, cut border crossings 95%. And those few who have dared to cross are being either prosecuted or deported. They're either facing significant jail time for trafficking, smuggling, harboring, aiding, impeding, or they're being immediately removed from our soil. Either way, at the end of the process, they are going home. He's re-implemented Remain in Mexico, and he has obtained historic cooperation from foreign countries all around the world in accepting their deportees back. And he has used the United States military to fully seal the southern border with a historic deployment of both active duty and National Guard troops, resumed the building of infrastructure. He has opened up Guantanamo Bay, and he's using military aircraft to carry out deportations all across this country. And ICE is joining with ATF, DEA, and FBI to carry out the largest deportation operation in American history. The criminals are going home. The border is sealed shut. America is safe, sovereign, proud, and free. We are a nation that everyone in the world understands all across this planet. You do not come here illegally. You will not get in. You will go to jail. You will go home. You will not succeed. This is the biggest and most successful change in any area of law enforcement that this nation has ever seen, and he did it in under 1 month.
So, Stephen, we're hearing about these Doge dividend checks that would be 20% back to taxpayers, 20% to pay down the debt. 60% is left. Who gets that?
Well, the way that it works is when you achieve savings, you can either return it to taxpayers, you can return it to our debtors, or it can be cycled into next year's budget, and then it just lowers the overall baseline for next year. So in other words, you can just transfer it into the next fiscal window and then lower the overall spending level. And that means that you can achieve a permanent savings that way, and that reduces the deficit.
And when is it that people might see those checks?
Well, this is all going to be worked on through the reconciliation process with Congress that's going underway right now. As you've seen, the Senate's moving a bill, the House is moving a bill. The president has great confidence in both chambers to deliver on his priorities. I would just take this opportunity to note that President Trump has made a historic commitment to the working class of this country to fight for major tax relief and major price relief. And cutting spending, as DOJ is doing, and cutting taxes is the key to delivering on both of those promises, and President Trump is resolutely committed to doing both.